Hello, everyone, and welcome once more to the Company Road podcast, where we bring you unexpected questions and even more unexpected answers around what it takes to drive positive change within organizations. And podcasts can be a little bit predictable, so I'm looking to change that up and keep things fresh. And as always, if you have a question, the more absurd or more abstract, the better, really. As long as it relates to business in some way, then just email me at chris@companyroad.co. And we'll respond to your question in the show. So I'm thinking of running a Q&A episode at some point in the future. So shoot some questions through. We can definitely take them on. So in keeping with the theme of unpredictability and keeping things fresh, I've been wanting to interview this week's wonderful guest for some time, someone who's traversed the lands of consulting and in-house roles, and who is currently Chief Experience Officer and Head of Applied AI at Academy XI. So let's give an asynchronous round of applause to the fabulous Amir Ansari. Amir, very warm welcome to the show.
Chris, look, thanks for the lovely intro. Probably a better intro that I would have done. And I'm really keen to see how predictable we can make this session.
Let's make it unpredictable. So if I see something, then you just give me the opposite.
I'll just give you a random answer and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's good. It's like a word generator, but we'll see how we go. So, Amir, tell us about some of the maybe more unpredictable moments of your career, and we can kick off with maybe a couple of stories about that. You know, what's been your path and what's kind of twisted and turned along the way?
Yeah, sure. I'll probably take a step back even before my professional life. For people who don't know me, I was born in Iran. I migrated when I was 10 years old. And I'll be honest with you, Chris, I think that being exposed to unpredictability happened very early on in my living life, and where a country that was born goes into war. We needed to flee, pack everything up in very short notice. So I think that probably set the scene for me to go, okay, life's full of ups and downs, and often unplanned ups and downs. And obviously at the time, I didn't think this. I thought to myself, holy crap, I've got to leave this country. My parents had told me we're going, and just having to go along the ride. And then over time in Australia, I moved primary schools, number of high schools, and most of it out of my control, out of my decision, to be honest, at the time. But I think that set the scene for how I then went about living life and treating life. And I think that me being a designer was in any way related to my upbringing, even though I always like to be creative. But I think it set the scene for me to go, you know what, life's full of ambiguity and I need to be comfortable with it. And I know a lot of people who probably listen to this podcast who come from a design background appreciate that designers often have a superpower, which is being comfortable with ambiguity. Over the years, I've been thrown into the deep end, sometimes with no support, sometimes with a lot of support. And one perfect example is early on being told that I need to go to UK and set up and manage a team. And this is early in my 20s. I've never managed a single human being. And now I've been told to go and lead and manage a team and have to go and live in another country for the very first time. And again, you just go, okay, this is happening. I just need to deal with it. And over the years, I've built toolkits, ways of processing. Sure, I still get butterflies in my tummy like anybody else when something gets thrown at you which you didn't expect. But I've come to realize that it'll be okay. I've always come out at the end. I've always managed to come out the other side with either success or just a small handful of bruises. And to be honest, I keep repeating that, Chris. Every time a new gnarly problem is thrown at me, be it at an executive strategic level or even at a mundane day-to-day life level, sure, the first reaction always is like anybody else, flight and fright. You have that initial response, but then I take a pause and go, no, you know what? I've had worse situations. I've been in this situation before, or I've heard somebody else. I've heard Chris been in that situation before. And through that, I give myself comfort that I'll come out the other end. And just talking about what I just said before, the toolkit is the collecting of the stories. Sure, sometimes they're my stories, but through being inquisitive and being, again, designer and constantly asking lots and lots of questions, that not only forms a mental model around what I'm going to be dealing with, so it gives me a little bit more comfort or be able to address the situation, but also asking others and almost passing on their stories being in that situation. They're the sort of things that often I use on a daily basis to tell myself, you know what, okay, this is something new. I need to deal with it. Yep, Chris has told me about this, or Jenny over there has told me about this, or I've dealt with this in the past 20 years ago, 40 years ago, last week. And that positive mindset of it's going to be okay, it goes a long way.
Yeah, nice. I really love that. You're the perfect guest to have on the show because the show's all about telling those stories and sharing those stories so that there's a positive sense of it can be done. And obviously, the more we share, the more we learn, the more we can take that as the accepted norm, and then we can just move on and actually focus our brain power and our headspace on more constructive things.
Correct.
I'm wondering if you've got these banker stories, what's your kind of method, or what's your routine for getting to the heart of how do you learn, essentially, is probably the best way to ask the question. How are you reflecting? How are you taking some of those learnings forward?
First and foremost, it's the questions, right? This happened literally half an hour ago, and I won't go through the detail because of, I guess, confidentiality, but I was told at very short notice, next week I need to run a workshop in a different state around a topic that I know really well, but I delivered that piece of content and the way it was designed by, let's say, another mentor and instructor. So the first thing you do, you go, ooh, okay, you get that crap. Next week, am I ready? Do I need to move things around? So you go through that initial emotional up and down. Then my process is, okay, what is it that I need to know? Some factual stuff. Who, when, where, how, why, what, all that sort of stuff. Right? So I ask those questions of the person who's given me, or across the other people who are sharing that scenario with me or situation. So just collect and collect. And often when you ask a question and you get a response, two other questions then pop up in my head. Would I say that's a learned skill? To be honest, actually, I don't know, because when I have this conversation with my wife all the time, and hopefully she's not listening through those thin walls, but she'll go to a GP and she'll come back and go, I've been diagnosed with X, or I need to take Y. And literally within the 10 minutes she's walked through the door, Chris, I'll ask 20 questions about that situation or what the GP had said, or did she actually ask this question? And she'll go, oh, crap. All right, you know what? From now on, you're going to come to every doctor's appointment with me. I'm not sure if that's something that's just inherent in me, or is that something we learn? Maybe I'm a designer, but although she's an architect as well. But regardless, I think I'm just naturally prone to asking lots of questions. So that's probably the first thing that I'll do. And based on that, I start to build mental models in my head. Okay, so this is the situation. This is the breadth. This is the depth. This is the circumstance. This is the potential things that can go wrong. This is what the outcome and impact it is that I need to fulfill. And more in my head, but sure, sometimes on a whiteboard, depending, I start to build the situation out. And then I go, okay, so I know the core information. I know what I need to do. Am I ready or not? That's a different thing. Have I seen this before? Has it been done before? Who else can I go for advice, coaching, and mentoring? So I'm going to put that on that bucket of learning that you said. The learning of that situation, and be it at a very acute situation or a pandemic size situation, just going through that process gives me comfort to go, okay, I've gone from unknowns to some knowns and known unknowns. And there'll be some unknown unknowns that I'll never find out until I'm in it. That's cool. I'm not going to worry about that. But try and cover as much information, learn, as you said, as much information as possible. And then the other thing that I'll just say is, now I've done this. I know everything I need to know. Positive mindset. Let's have a crack at it. Now, what's the worst that can happen? I might get a bruise. I might get a scar. I might get a client to give me a negative feedback. But the risk of that is minimal. Maybe because I've been around the traps a bit and I know what to expect and what to predict. Often people get that analysis paralysis, right? Or they're like a deer staring at a headlight. And that's a human reaction. We all go through that. But it's just constantly reminding myself, no, stop looking at the headlight. Look beyond the headlight. What's the outcome? And I just progress through. And frankly, every single time I've come out the other side. And so far it's worked well for me. My nickname, Chris, was Hack and Wing. Amir just hacks it, or he just wings it. And I think the reason my design teams or people that I used to lead used to say that is because they were expecting a magical framework. Oh, so where's Amir's framework? Where's it on the whiteboard? Does he have a deck? And when I say I don't have it, or I don't have one, they go, oh, he's just winging it. It's just this magical skill he has. But everything I've just said today is that framework. Someone can probably capture it and put it into a magical matrix and go, here you go. This is one element, right?
Yeah, I love that. I think the interesting thing there is around adaptability. The extent to which you as a person, not you necessarily, but anyone, are happy to let go of your pride to some extent and your reputation, and basically accept that in that situation, you might not know all the answers, and you're able to basically navigate that in some ways. I'm interested in that point of view, but also the point of view of the people that have worked with you. Like, what do you think? Are they looking scared when you're looking scared, or are they feeling quite a lot of trust? And when does that kind of kick in?
I've never been asked that question. Are they scared when they see I'm scared?
Unpredictability, we said, right?
It's a good one. I'll be honest with you. I've led heads of and led leaders and seniors, juniors. I've led the entire spectrum within a design organization, but I've made sure I come across cool, calm, and collected. Right now, you probably know me. I can be erratic and full of energy and bubbles and things like that. Something else that I often tell people, Chris, as well, is I'm a systems one thinker. So I do a lot of quick response type thinking and I often do my thinking through talking. So I preface everything I say to my teams. I'll go, just so you know, this is how I work. Mir's handbook. This is the README file. I think through talking. So as you ask me a question or come to me with a problem, I'll just start talking. Now, that's not recommendations, that's not advice, that's not a mandate. That's me talking. And you might see me, Chris, within 30 seconds, I might do a 180-degree flip. Don't go, oh, Amir has no idea. That's just my process. And then when I go through that process, there'll come a point where I go, okay, I've done my thinking now. And through that thinking, which is verbal, I might ask a lot of questions. And there'll come to a point I go, okay, this is what I really think. But to your point around, I'm scared, do I show it? I try not to, because as a leader, I'm responsible to keep the team coherent and confident and with a strong direction. And that's a pressure with any leader, right? Not just in the design field, but as leaders, it's good to be transparent. It's good to put your hand up, go, this is a new one. This is unpredictable. I've never faced this before. But I don't go, holy crap. I go, hang on. Let's get together. Let's ask those questions. Let's pick up some stories from the past. If anybody else can share a situation where this has happened, how can we deal with it? If deep down inside, Chris, I might be, my brain and my gut are very heavily connected. My gut might be going all over the place, but I make sure my face is cool. I'm asking those questions because I think it's unfair to, as a leader, when they look up to you to go, this is a holy crap moment, team. We're doomed. We don't know what to do. So yeah, and it puts a pressure, of course, but I've always tried to decouple that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. One of the things that we're exploring this month is around setting up foundations for growth within organizations in one way. So how do you make that solid? And I think part of it, like you're describing, but you almost got to observe the situation you're in a little bit and read it to be able to then build out from there. So I think if there's ambiguity, then there's a certain approach probably. If there are very strongly held opinions and tightly held opinions and beliefs, then that's another thing you notice. But in terms of either organizational teams that are working really well and have those foundations set, what are you seeing as some of the key characteristics walking into a building? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Often the research starts before you walk into the building, right? You ask questions from people in your network around that organization, that design discipline, the CEO, the CPO, whoever you might be leading or the client that you're going to be engaging with. You want to have some background stories. I think that's the first thing. And then over the years of building, grown and scale design teams and capability and maturity, also inherited teams, first and foremost is, again, get the facts right. So what do I mean by that is obviously not just the organization itself and where they've come from, where they're going, but the teams and the individuals. I'll give a couple of examples. Obviously, building a team from scratch is a bit easier because you have full control. You have autonomy around who you pick and how you form it. But often the biggest challenge design leaders find is when they're thrown into inherit a team. It doesn't matter what size, right? They didn't get a choice who they hired. They're not across the skills and career capability and matrix. A bunch of reasons why decisions have been made that it was outside of your control. So one of the first things I tend to do is get the facts. Okay, so this team, who are they? Doesn't matter if there's 20 people, 5 people, 200 people. Who are they? Where they come from? What have they done? What have they achieved? And often that's one-on-ones, but obviously if the team's big, then I'll rely on their leads and heads and the other people within my leadership team to give me that fact and give me the insight. Again, doing the research, right? And then I pride myself on supporting every individual's career growth. So I pay a lot of attention to each individual, doesn't matter what level they are, because I often find they'll take solace and can get insights from different levels within their leadership team, not just the direct reporting line. So fact find, understand where they're at. And then now you have your starting point A, where Chris is here. Okay, Chris has decided or has talked about that they want to get to point B, which is either a sideways movement, move up the ladder, whatever that might be, or a particular skill set that I don't have. Great. Once you've got point A and point B, the two endpoints, to be honest, everything else in the middle is pretty easy. Okay, how do we get from A to B? Stepping stones, what are the skills that are missing? And we just go through that process. And it's pretty simple. It works really well. And look, I'm not a people and culture expert, but over the years, this seems to have worked really well. Start with the A point of the individual or the business, decide where they want to go, point B, and then again, using stories, questions, historical insights to go, okay, what are the things we can put into this bucket to get us from point A to point B? It doesn't matter how short or how long term it is. As part of that, learning is mostly embedded within that process rather than individual. There needs to be a growth. Often, because I always used to get asked, I work for small organizations, I work for large organizations. In the large ones, there's 15, 20 ranks in the hierarchy. So career growth upwards is obviously a lot easier. But when you're working for a small agency where it's really flat, there'll be the individual and then there might be me and there's nobody else. And then you've got the founder and the CEO. So working up the ladder becomes a challenge. And the way I've managed to address that with individuals is highlight that growth doesn't necessarily mean up the ladder climbing. Sure, there might be an aspect, especially if you want to move on. That is one level of growth, but you can have growth at quite a micro level. Be it a skill, be it a particular industry that you need to work in, be it that you're really crap at giving feedback, so you're going to get better at giving feedback. And in 6 months' time, you can look back and go, oh, I've just grown. I'm now a master of giving feedback. And I use it to tell people that if you're in an organization and you love the people, you love the work, you love the context, use it, stay there and look for opportunities for growth, but that's not always going upwards. It might be going sideways. It might be going acutely in a particular industry. And just remind yourself that you are growing in that space. You are learning. You are becoming a great person at giving feedback, or you might be a great designer, or you might be great at now looking at over a P&L or the financial acumen required for designers. Just constantly remind yourself, because often people forget that they're growing. And unless somebody reflects and tells them, wow, Chris, you've really grown over the last 1 week, 2 months, 6 years, whatever. Sometimes when they're deep in it, they can't see, they can't raise up to the top of the forest and see where they're going. So they do need that constant reminder.
Yeah,
Look, I'm going on a bit of a rant here.
No, ranting is what this show's all about too. I think the optionality feels like is important, because I feel like if you're in that organization, and we've been in this situation, we feel like we're a bit fixed. We've been set some targets, we've got the goals, we're doing the KPIs, we're aiming at one or a few things, but that feels like it's a set track. But what you're saying, you can also look above the trees and see what's around you and take a sideways step. That'll lead to something, just have side conversations. It feels like you can either have the tunnel vision or you can look broad, but a lot of people fall into the trap of just being too singular, really.
Correct. And it's often good to push yourself out of the comfort zone. I actually feel really uncomfortable when I'm too comfortable, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot around that. And schools of thought these days around the fact that you should be uncomfortable with something major in your life every month, right? Next thing maybe just talk about is around how businesses, so we talked a little about individuals, but how businesses you see are kind of changing well. So in terms of strategies for scaling business, maneuvering, getting ahead of competition, like anything in that space that you feel you've seen as being important to bring up?
Yeah, good one. Look, I've seen a trend, and this is cyclical, right? And you've been around long enough to see this. In the tech space, there's often the cyclical nature of relying on in-house knowledge workers and capability, or then outsourcing everything, right? That happens every 3 to 5 years as company needs to cut costs and so forth, therefore outsource, or then they want to build IP, they bring in source. So that tends to happen often. Obviously, the most recent trend has also been, specifically talking from a design perspective or even product development, that there's a school of thought you need to have center of excellence. So you need to have a leader representing product, a leader representing engineering, a leader representing design, right? Then they'll run their center of excellence and capability, and then they might have their teams and designers embedded within squads, tribes, teams, whatever the terminology that organization tends to use. And over the last 12 to 18 months, what I've noticed is when they do that, especially when they've got various product lines or products in general, then measuring the ROI on those products becomes really harder because resources are spread across everywhere. And so I've seen over the last 18 months that P&L has been shifted to, we're going to do a total reorg again. We're going to remove these heads of or central leaders, and we're going to have P&L accountability per product line, vertical, whatever we want to call it. And so often leadership levels get axed. You'll have a little mini CEO or GM, and then you've got product design and development in what I like to call silos, unfortunately. And then you tend to see these businesses, in effect, running little mini businesses within an organization, not necessarily talking well together. And then you start to get duplication, inefficiencies, and so forth. So that tends to be a bit of a cycle. So that's what probably companies have done that's set them backwards. Sure, maybe financially it makes it slightly easier to report on, but I bet you in about 2 to 3 years' time, companies go, you know what, we'll be building really crap products. You know what, we should have a center of design and someone to lead product and someone to lead technology. And they'll just go through the process again and again. And I think organizations that I constantly hear that continue to do well is, I guess it's easier said than done, is worry less about the organizational structure and transformation and everything else that happens all the time. I just go back to first principles. Who are our customers? What are they saying about us? What are their pains and gains? And how we're going to solve it? And design initiatives to make that happen. Ignoring or being agnostic of the org structure and everything else. Go, right, what are the problems that we're trying to solve? How are we going to solve it? Prioritizing them is really key. A couple of gigs ago, I worked for an organization. I was part of the leadership team, senior leadership team, and it was a global company, Chris. I think we had over 100 initiatives. And then we said, oh, this is ridiculous. Let's prioritize. And we prioritized it to 49. 49 is a large number. Imagine an organization trying to manage 49 key initiatives that they have to then report on all the way up to the board and shareholders. That's a shitload of initiatives, right? So I think organizations that work really well are the ones that are really acutely prioritizing the core stuff. I won't mention number of initiatives, every organization is different, but just like what's really important, and just let's nail that and let's report on that. And then we work on the next thing. So, and as part of that, obviously human-centered design and design thinking is really important, but lack of prioritization I see at enterprise level, Chris, and I'm sure you could probably share your stories, is so rife and still around every day.
Yeah. I think I want to bring up the topic of patience within business because I feel agreed on the thing or the list of 100, list of the 49, and getting to that alignment point feels like that's the biggest step. When there's chaos and you say, okay, we're now going to agree on what the priorities are and let's focus on that. But getting to that point is big enough. And then you basically got to say, okay, we don't want to prioritize from that point. We want to have it all done and we want it all done really quickly. So how much of that can we do in the next 3 to 6 months? And then you're into the rat race again. So you're basically just trying to get the highest priority things done as quickly as you can. And yeah, I'm wondering whether the culture of just racing to the finish gets to the best results either.
Yeah, look, not necessarily. You're 100%, because businesses then make quite rash decisions or make decisions without knowing all the information, right? Not having done the due diligence and research, and often are reactive. No, that's definitely not the right solution. For the past 6 months, I've been using this analogy of one-way and two-way doors, and which I'm sure many people who are listening have heard of. This idea of when you're trying to make, I think it was maybe a Jeff Bezos quote, I can't remember, but yeah, it's a one-way or two-way doors. What does that mean? Is like there's one-way door decisions, meaning if you go through that door, there's no coming back. Door's closed behind you, is locked up, is concreted on the other side. And so using that to go, okay, you know what? Let's put the brakes on. Let's not be so rash. Let's put that black hat on, Edward de Bono's black hat, and let's look at all the possibilities and risks associated with this decision or this initiative or this task or whatever. So that hopefully allows individuals to put the brakes on and go, let's need to think through. Or it's a two-way door decision, right? And for those two-way door decisions, you go through it, you know what? Oh, we didn't get it quite right. Okay, we can go back. Now, obviously, there's risk associated with that: brand risk, legal risk, commercial risk, custom risk. And that'll determine if the risk is so hard that it becomes a one-way door. But just even asking that question in that way helps people to understand, okay, can we go really quickly? Because the impact of that is, if we get it wrong, it's okay, we can backtrack. Or we've put mitigates in place to manage the risks. Or if this is big, it has financial risk, governance and oversight. If you're working in a regulatory framework, then obviously you do need to put the brakes on. But getting the priorities first, I think, is really crucial. And I've talked to many people in the leadership space, not just in design. And honestly, Chris, the thing I keep hearing is, man, we are just trying to do so much shit and we're doing them all badly. And sometimes we don't know why we're doing them. And I go, oh my God, this is a pandemic.
It is. You think about, in particular in the larger organizations, I'm working with one at the minute, and the fact that so much time and resource and money is behind a set of initiatives that in 3 years, as from what you're doing in AI, there are things that you can't with confidence in a certain corporate environment say they're going to lead to anything better, really. All you know is what's in front of you, and you're going off the data that you've got and the intelligence that you've got, and the decisioning is effectively informed by that, but you can't actually steer it differently because nobody's going to buy into something that you think is going to be totally different in 3 years' time. So from an innovation standpoint, it's short-termist. Like, you can't predict the future, but we're still going to aim at everything because at least then everyone knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and look, I guess I'm lucky at Academy XI. We're an education company and we're small enough that the execs are close enough to the leadership team and everybody else that we can actually make those decisions, and we can ask those questions. Obviously, the bigger the organization gets, you're often removed 2, 3, even 4 levels. You're not even directly related to strategy, which sometimes makes those decisions. Yeah, that is hard. And probably one of the frustrations I used to get from a lot of my team members in previous organizations was, sure, as a leader, I used to get a lot of compliments and you're doing great, thank you very much. But what we don't understand is, why is the company going in that direction? Or they've got X initiatives, but we get told by the product managers or the GM of that business we're working with that we need to do Y. So often the leadership teams within the organization are not aligned. So the worker bees and the people who are helping to deliver on those outcomes are sitting there going, I have no idea why I'm doing this. And that leads to attrition or lack of confidence. So I think as leaders, the advice would be that no matter where you are, be a conduit upwards and downwards, because at any point, if the glue breaks or the scaffolding falls apart, you need to just try and be able to get your level above or 2 levels above and 2 levels below to remain unified and connected. And that's another role that leadership needs to play, right? Again, agnostic of the discipline of that leader.
Yeah, I think so. The difference in speed or the perception of speed or the perception of change within an organization it feels like it's really important, because obviously your leadership might think that things need to move a certain speed. The people that are doing the work actually thinking, oh, that's quite hard, or maybe they'd love to move faster because there's some frustration there. I was also thinking, as you're telling me about the doors, the one-way door, the two-way door, whether the revolving door is also one to stretch it to, where basically there's change just spinning around the whole time. Nobody knows where they're at, and it's just like total chaos. And I think I've seen organizations like that where almost so many initiatives about change are in place at once that it's difficult to know at a very foundational level that you're safe in your role and that you know what you're doing. So have you seen that?
Until recently, I didn't put too much time and effort into it, actively working on it. But I think you've nailed it. I've observed, even at Academy XI, previous company Iris, and agency work beforehand, often organizations, because sometimes they're in a siloed or different disciplines and functions are doing things, but not realizing that it still has an impact on the end user or end staff member. So that staff member gets exposed to 4 or 5 different organizational change things happening, be in the HR space, finance space, team structure space, that they go, wow, there's a lot of change here that they can't handle. And I've come to realize the importance of change management. Now, some people used to think that's a dirty word, but I think putting enough time to design that change and asking all the questions and go, okay, what's the impact? We're going to do this, but they're also doing that, and that's also happening over there. What's the impact on our staff and our clients and customers? Ooh, is that too much? Or hang on, that's going to have a negative impact on this thing. And in fact, that's actively got to discourage this other change that we're trying to do. Visualizing, I think, is really important. And a good change manager asks amazing questions, and I worked with a few, and can really map out and then put steps in place, which sometimes includes putting brakes on certain things, doing things in parallel, or doing things in a series. That requires clear and purposeful thought. And when you, me, whoever within our job are trying to juggle a bunch of stuff, we may forget that there's other change happening somewhere else. So I think, look, you've mentioned this, and I feel like I could talk about this for hours as well. Change and managing change in organizations is underrated, but it's highly impactful when it's done right.
Yeah. And I think in the smaller organizations, it's obviously hard to bring in that layer of expertise sometimes. It's not always, it's a bit of a luxury, right? I don't know whether in your organization, but certainly in ones that I've had at smaller consultancies, boutique consultancies and studios, or even just small teams where the budget's fixed and you can't move on that. You can't just bring in it's like having a project manager, and that's a luxury. You can't always have the extra resource to help coordinate people and set the velocity. From your experience, is there any more organic ways through Agile or anything else that you've seen working well from a design ops point of view that you think is, okay, if you can't get the change manager, these are some of the things that you need to think about?
Yeah, good question. I think you mentioned those two words, right? I think design ops or operationalizing things you're going to discipline, I think it goes a long way. And what do I mean by that? Again, I don't know who's going to be listening, but no matter what your craft is with design, development, legal, or whatever, thinking about processes, frameworks, tooling, the people and their skills required, just having a view of that, I think is really important. And especially processes, like mapping out processes for the key top 5 or 10 things that are important for your discipline, I think is really important. And then for when you don't have change managers or that project manager who can have oversight around your delivery work and whatever, again, and this goes back to building softer skills within knowledge workers, is asking those questions. Yeah, I used to remember in agency world, the biggest barrier we had was clients wanted to pay for project management, right? We got 3 designers, 5 designers, a couple of devs, whatever that might be. And then when we said, and here's a project manager, no, we don't need project managers. We'll manage it ourselves. And we know when a client says they're going to manage a project, you're doomed. You're going to overservice because you've got a fixed time and material, which is the worst case, or you're a fixed price model. You know you're going to overservice, right? But you can't bring that person in. So either you put them in at zero cost and you try and build some fat somewhere else, or fatting that, you build some of the skills within the delivery teams, some project management skills, some change skills, some asking the right questions skills. So there's a team that can go, okay, let's build the scope together. Let's build how we're going to go about this and just fill some of the gaps of what things could go wrong and almost taking shared responsibility of delivering this outcome and the impact of the decision that they need to make. I think that's important for, again, everybody, not just for the person who just asked the legal question or someone who asked the technology questions. I think, again, just thinking about product delivery, everybody, it's a team sport, right? Delivering a product and outcome is a team sport. And I think everybody needs to be able to just ask those questions, failing having a project manager or a change manager, just so that at least they know some of the moving parts. They might not know it all, but at least they're not going fully blind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think in that setup stage, the planning is obviously key, but in terms of how it's framed, both in the vision, the goals, the expectation, the outcome, the deliverables, there's often a bit of ambiguity around that sort of discussion, particularly when there are multiple stakeholders involved. Like everyone thinks they're getting something different from it. And then the people that are having to deliver it are thinking, okay, I'm not sure really what we're aiming at here. So alignment there is really key. It feels, and then how you do it is like, how do you plan for that? I think a lot of work, even if it feels like it's an indulgence up front, but you're thinking about your pre-mortems and future perspectives and like some of these exercises that can basically reveal what you think might go wrong. You make your imagination go wild about how badly could this go, and then you step that through and think, okay, how are we going to plan for that? Some of that can help too. But I think it's just getting people to agree feels like it's hard when you're moving at speed, and everyone seems quite focused on the thing that they think they're going to do.
It's interesting. In a previous agency that I worked for, we had an individual who was from the engineering background, and they were always, what's the right word? They were perceived to be the negative, the party pooper, the one who always asked but he can't because of this, or what's the risk associated with that? And I remember pulling that individual aside one day and going, hey, listen, you're always so negative. You're always asking, you're always covering the risks and the doomsday event. We're trying to progress forward. We've got a new client. We're all excited. You just need to flip it. You need to change and have a positive mindset. And the person said, yeah, I'm more than happy not to wear the black hat. And again, referencing the Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats, right? The only reason I do is because nobody else does. Nobody else wears that hat. Nobody else asks those gnarly questions upfront and early, the pre-mortem type questions. And I've been there long enough, this individual was saying, that I can see it skewing off and falling off a cliff. And from that day, I said, you know what? This individual is actually quite right. And I've got the Edward Debona book. It's probably 20, 30 years old. It's got a lot of dust on it, but I still
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
it back and go, when we set up a team, be it with a new client or a new initiative, either explicitly or implicitly, I'll make sure within the team we all put all the 6 hats on and ask those questions, the positive questions, the neutral questions, the what if questions, and the attitude that goes with those hats, just so that we get good coverage. And I think that's, again, an underappreciated skill. Recently, I just finished off teaching at one of the universities, a Bachelor of Innovation. And I, as one of the
Mm.
modules, I pulled out the 6 thinking hats. And I said, this is a great framework and skill that every individual needs to have within your teams.
Yeah.
And we talked about it. And again, some of the individuals hadn't heard of that, maybe because I'm showing my age now, but it's a forgotten art.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I've got the book, and the hats are often pulled out. It feels, or not often enough in some cases, but it's definitely a good one. And I was thinking as we're talking just about growth mindset a little bit, and obviously sometimes it feels very fixed, and people are in their it was like a stereotype of their own self. Everyone's going to be that person's going to be the villain. That person's going to be like super detailed on the questions about risk, compliance. Somebody else is going to be a visionary, has no idea how to deliver it. And some of these stereotypes come into play, right? But like growth mindset is like one of these blanket phrases that feels like if everyone can have a bit of an open mind and not hold their own views too preciously, and they're open to certain things, then you can cultivate that and actually build that. But what are some of the techniques that you've used to maybe foster a degree of growth mindset within your teams or organizations?
I think the growth mindset or open mindset can be quite confronting, right? Because it requires you, again, to be open about ambiguity. You're going to experience something that you haven't experienced before, but you're going to keep an open mind. So I can totally appreciate and I do it sometimes, where I just go, no, I need the comfort, I need the security knowing what I know. You put blockers on. But in terms of how I've managed to get people to have that mindset is, again, I think first and foremost, giving them comfort, but as a leader going, hey, you know what, we're going to be just security. You're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Like almost like you open the door, go, "Hi team, we're going to be fine." And I think that already puts individuals who are potentially combative or wearing the black hat to go, oh, okay, cool. My leader says we're going to be cool. All right. Shoulders drop, heart rate slows down. Everybody feels a little bit more confident and comfortable, right? So I think just preparing the individual or the teams to go, you know what, we'll be fine. We'll come out at the end of it. So I think that's the first step. I think that's typically what I tend to do. Then the second step, go, okay, now, and I'm probably repeating myself, right? Where are we? What do we know? What don't we know? Hey, Tom, Dick and Harry, Susie, Jenny, and Lisa, share your thoughts. Anybody else, questions? And within this group or team, just throw all the questions that people have. And again, you could run a design workshop where everybody writes it on sticky notes, but just asking those questions gives everybody confidence. Oh, okay. Also, he doesn't know and she doesn't know, or but he knows and she knows. Again, raises the confidence of the team. Oh, across the team, we've got the formula, the ingredients for us to be okay or even succeed. Right? So that's often like a step 2, the questions. And then you go from, okay, understanding the space to, okay, then how we're going to solve it, right? But by then, I tend to find individuals a lot more comfortable. And again, Chris, you and I both work in design disciplines. We know how to create icebreakers and create a space for people to use the different sides of the brain. Throw some of that in there. People who've often work in a technical space get the opportunity to be a bit more creative and brainstorm and not have limitations. Go through that process. And then you often get to the end of it and people just already feel so energized at that process. Now, that process might be a 2-hour workshop or might be a 6-month initiative. But when you go through that process, often you come out the other end and teams go, okay, whoa, we got there. Wow. And then going back to what I said before, hey, did you notice you grew? Remember at the start of this thing, you were here and you said, you're complaining because you wanted to go upwards or sideways or whatever. Just looking back, look at how much you've grown. And I remember the conversation I used to have with some of my design leads and heads of, and they'd come to me with a challenge, all stressed. They'd go, oh my God, I don't know what to do, Amir. We'd do the walk around the blocks. This is pre and during COVID when we could. And then give some guidance, ask a lot of open-ended questions. And then 3 months down the track, often, again, they'd forgotten, right? They'd go and do the work. They get some praises by their team members and whatever. And then we'll do another around the block walk. And I go, hey, remember 3 months ago when we had that walk? And remember you said X, Y, and Z? What do you think now? And you go, oh my goodness, geez, I was so naive then. Or, man, I was in that deep end of the pool, but yeah, I've come out the other side. And this is not me asking that because I want the praise, but it's just getting them to reflect. Chris, people, again, life moves quick, pandemics come and go. People don't stop to reflect and reflect on their own growth. And so they need people like you and I, or their leaders, or their partners, or their kids to sometimes tap them on the shoulder and just remind them where they've come from, and where they've been, and where they are now. And to be honest, this is simple stuff, and that for me has worked time and time again. And I couldn't put that in a framework. I couldn't draw it for you, but it's those sort of things, right? Give comfort, give support as a leader. You're cool. Ask lots of questions. Unpack the situation. Go from point A, find out what point B is. Figure out the steps in between. At the end of it, just turn around and just look back and reflect. That itself creates that, I guess, the opportunity for growth. Yeah. Anyway, now we can go on to.
Yeah. No, I like it. I think there's a lot in there to maybe think about, and yeah, it just feels like the human aspect of business is getting harder in some ways. And we're talking virtually now, but there's a lot of that going on. I think having those kind of round the block chats feels like the kind of fat's been trimmed off the running of a business or an organization a little bit. So some of that softer time is not always there, where you might turn up and then you spend 2 hours just walking the floors and having the coffees, and it's not really that anymore. It feels to me anyway. But yeah, I like the approach, and I think that keeping that kind of constant connection, or looking for points or opportunities at which you would offer feedback voluntarily and in a way that feels appropriate to that situation and to that person. If you feel like you can bring up something that you've noticed from the past that can then tie to progress, as you were describing, then that's really positive. I always, like, from my point of view, I maybe struggled with some of that when I was managing teams. Like, I think that actually doing it in the right way can come across a little bit forced or a little bit unnatural, because you're the one that suggested the coffee, and then you're walking them around the block, and so you've got 5 points that you're going to raise with them, and it didn't feel like that natural at times. Anyway, it felt like it was a bit forced. But yeah, you come from, in your bio, you talk about smiles and hugs and some of the softer side, how you work. Have you learned that off some people? Do you think that's just within you as a person? Not everyone's geared up for that touchy-feely way of working.
Correct. My daughter will hate me. I'm not sure if she's going to listen to this, but a very tactile person, and she isn't. And to some extent, you could argue my wife is. I'm just, maybe again, it's a culture. I think it's probably more of a cultural thing coming from the Middle East. I love a good hug. I love to touch. I like to touch people on the shoulder. Just let them know I'm here. And I do find it human, appropriately, by the way. It was all appropriate, above the board, very sensible. But just even a little bit of a tap, I find, goes a long way to tell someone that I'm listening, I'm hearing you. Yeah, that's a really good point you made there, Chris. Tap on the shoulder or tap on the elbow. So I'm just naturally tactile. I love a good hug. I think people in the past have said, look, my superpower is the ability to connect people, and just, oh, Chris has got this thing, or got an issue, or got this skill, and Jenny over there needs that, and I'll just connect people together. And to make that connection happen, I need to know enough about Chris, and I need to know enough about Jenny and their stories. Otherwise, I can't say, Chris and Jenny, meet and figure out if you guys have something to share. No. So when I ask that question, I'm bonding with you, right? I'm learning about you, your history, your story. I can then paraphrase that story when I'm talking to Jenny. So I think, yeah, human connection for me is really great. Have I suffered during COVID? Like, at the moment, I'm 5 days a week from home because Academy Exercise main head office is in Sydney. Maybe I fly up once a month. But yeah, I do long for that human connection. So when I do get the opportunity to have a coffee, and I don't drink coffee, so I have to pay overpriced tea with someone around the block, just to, get out there, move around, and just get out of the context and the space I'm in. I think it really helps. Look, inherently, and I hope I'm not swearing here, people are not born dickheads. Let's be honest, right? Children, we're pure, we think creatively, we have the best heart. And so everybody grows up, and nature versus nurture goes down a path and gets influences and world experiences that then leads them to become jaded or whatever. But by nature, everybody initially grows up with the best intentions, right? And to be honest, I still think about that. So when I come across someone who's, again, maybe a bit forced, maybe a bit combative or whatever, as hard as it is, I just try and ask myself, hang on, why is this person the way they are? And often by the hug and the tap or the connection and the smile breaks down some of those barriers that allows me to then get deep into that person and go, oh, what's this person really about? And again, lots of questions, right? I ask people a lot of questions. I'm not sure if they like it or not, but it's worked for me in the past. Until that backfires, I'll probably continue to do that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, seeing the good in people, I think, is a great starting point. You're looking for that, but also looking for some commonality in one way or another. There are various films and scenes that kind of spring to mind with Darth Vader, and you're thinking about how he perceives that father figure to still be in there in some way or another. We could talk about that for another episode, another time. But it's looking past the immediate challenge a lot of the time, it feels like. So if there's a point of friction or a difference of opinion, then you look for the common ground in that situation and start with a connection point and then bring in other people as you need to as well, from what you were describing.
Look, I will attest that it's been a tough 2-3 years or 4 years now, right? Even just as COVID hit, even post-COVID and the tech wreck and the tech industry going through redundancies and shrinkages, interest rates going up, wars across the world. It's been a tough 4 or 5 years mentally for a lot of people. As much as possible, I think we all need to just give each other a little bit of slack. And by no means am I saying that allows you to be violent and or aggressive. No, but just everyone's a bit stressed. And I think it's prudent for us to just reflect on that and be appreciative and just maybe ease off the pressures and requests we ask people while making sure that our businesses are financially viable or our relationships with our partners and families are still functioning. But just, I think, including myself, and I think need to just give people some space at the moment.
Yeah. Have you seen that work out? How have you introduced that into your work?
Even from the leadership perspective, I'll often put the brakes on with the leaders who are asking, hey, listen, can we just slow down for a second? And the reason I'm asking you this is because of the impact this is having on X, Y, and Z, the number of change that they're going through, etc. Just, again, bring that story up the chain so people who are not directly related can see, oh, I wasn't aware of that. That's just, again, stories, questions, sharing. I think that's really important, creates that transparency. But I must admit, as leaders, we often I shouldn't say undervalued. Praise is always given downwards. Very seldom is praise upwards. And also, if you think about CEOs, like, I think mentoring and coaching is really important. Everybody at all levels needs to have a mentor and coach. But the higher up the chain you go, often you're doing that role for the first time or it's new. Like a CEO who's a first-time CEO, they don't go to CEO school. Maybe they're the board of directors course, but often they're in an ambiguous space. And if they look up, who's up? The board, the chair. But really, I think everybody needs a little bit of support to do some of the stuff that we've talked about today, because otherwise I think leadership have a lot of weight on their shoulders and they can often then either drop the ball or fail to deliver. And I think we all at all levels need a bit of support.
Yeah, I often found, like, going through different stages of personal growth within organizations that, you're always thinking upwards in the vertical in a way, but actually the sideways connections that you make, if it's a buddy or a mentor or somebody who's not exactly, in your role exactly, but you've got a thing in common and you're in a similar space, maybe a similar stage of life, or you've been from similar backgrounds, or you've got something else that you share an interest with. I think those connections are just as important in a way as the other
100%.
ones that you compare yourself to from within your team, but also above.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we might leave it there. I think that's a good place to finish, and a lovely sentiment around, I think, taking time out to really understand the context of where a lot of discussions are at within business. And I think that you can slow it down where you want to. It does take a bit of moderation, obviously. It takes somebody with a strong voice to do that sometimes. But as you're saying, you can do that as the right person. Wear the different hat, obviously. Lots of other things that we've learned from the chat too. So really appreciate you coming onto the show, Amir, and thanks again for coming on.
Chris, love it. No, thank you. And I must admit, as we were talking, I thought, you know what? I need to practice more of what I preach, the stuff that I talk about today. Some of them I've forgotten, and I go, you know what? Yeah, no, I need to do more of this myself. So it's a good reminder, and I'm going to definitely go back and listen to the session again and take some more notes, even though I hate the sound of my own voice. But I think I'll deal with that because it was a really fruitful conversation. I really appreciate it, Chris.
Not a problem. And from what you're saying at the start, if you think by talking and you think you can look back on what you've said, then that's probably going to be pretty good, pretty useful, right? At some point.
Exactly right.
I'll say goodbye. Thanks so much. Okay, so that's it for this episode. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end. So thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review and share this episode with your friends, team members, leaders, if you think it'll make a difference. After all, we're trying to help you, the entrepreneurs, kick more goals within your organizations. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show, please email me directly at chris@companyroad.co. I answer all messages, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And to hear about the latest episodes and updates, please head to companyroad.co to subscribe. Tune in next Wednesday for another new episode.